The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season will go down in history as the most active tropical season on record, with 30 named storms, 13 of which took aim at the U.S. coast from Texas to New Jersey, and 5 of which directly impacted the state of Louisiana. Every county of the state at some point in the summer of 2020 would find themselves in some sort of tropical warning, forcing residents to evacuate from various areas across the state on more than one occasion. I was directly impacted by Laura, Sally, Delta, and Zeta, and couldn't seem to find my way out of the bayou. Among all of these storms, Laura would go on to be the strongest and most destructive of the swarm of hurricanes to impact the U.S. coast. A powerful Category 4 hurricane with winds just 5 miles per hour shy of a Category 5. Until 2018, it had been nearly 30 years since the last Category 5 struck the U.S. coast, but in the last 2 years, the Atlantic has had back-to-back hurricanes that would reach Cat 5 intensity upon landfall, with Laura knocking on the front door yet again. On August 16th, a wave off of Africa was being closely monitored for future tropical development, and by August 20th, this area would be officially classified as a tropical depression, but the future of future Laura was very uncertain. Any land interaction with Puerto Rico could rip Laura's core apart and prevent any future development in the Gulf of Mexico due to the rugged, mountainous terrain. Laura was also not alone. Tropical storm Marco was being forecasted to develop into a Category 1 hurricane before making landfall somewhere along the Louisiana coast. It was also the first time ever the Gulf Coast was looking at an unprecedented 2 hurricanes in the Gulf at the same time. However, in the coming days, it was becoming apparent that Laura was eventually going to become the big problem, and by August 25th, I was on the road for the first chase to begin. Now, this part of Louisiana is particularly tricky to chase in and is known as to most of us as the no-chase zone. Many miles of marshland stand between any highly populated areas and the Gulf waters, and with Laura now forecasted to be approaching Category 5 intensity in the dead of night at landfall, it was obvious chasing along the coast was not going to be possible, and that's when our eyes shifted to Lake Charles. A densely populated city 30 miles from the ocean, providing multiple parking garages and prime viewing to safely document the inevitable amount of debris that would be flying by us. While not ideal, all of us knew it had to be here. So we finally arrived in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and it is about 3:00 p.m. right now, and we are pushing Cat 5 intensity for Hurricane Laura, which is sitting just off of the coast here. I think that the northeast quadrant of the eye wall is literally going to pass right over here. It's really flat just to the south here, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of friction to really weaken it right now, but there is rumors that it could be a Cat 5 at the next update. Time is now 10:15. And we are waiting on the final arrival of Laura. A couple tornado warnings out, but we're not going to see anything, so we're not going to try. And now it's just the very impatient waiting game. As I wandered the ghostly, empty streets of Lake Charles for as long as I safely could, businesses were already being damaged, and at times I'd even see some curious locals that had stayed behind, poking their heads out before the mayhem would unfold. As I rounded the corner to hunker down in my parking garage, away from all the debris, I was stopped dead in my tracks. Laura's vicious winds had burst the windows of the Capital One skyscraper attached to my garage and was now being gutted from the inside out, sending a tremendous amount of debris and glass hurtling into the air and directly impacting my vehicle. I was so transfixed, though, that I froze in place instead of getting to the cover of my garage. It wasn't until a big piece of debris smacked my car that I came to and retreated to shelter, and watched and especially listened to the raw power of Laura rip the city of Lake Charles to shreds.
Whole skyscraper's going. Not good. Oh no. Oh God, gotta get out of the debris. Oh my God. okay. Too late. I'm gonna back up a little. Oh, God! Backing up a little. Hold on, guys. Oh my God! Are you okay, dude? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. Holy.
After being nearly struck by a huge piece of roof that could have easily taken my life, all of us seeking shelter in the garage were now on heightened alert. Mesovortices that orbit around the hurricane continued to impact our garage, sending pieces of debris in all directions. We entered the eye of the hurricane, but the calm never came, providing no relief from the flying projectiles that were being tossed about the city. Listen closely, and you'll hear what sounds like the entire city groaning and begging for mercy as Laura continued her onslaught.
This whole town is getting shredded.
Jesus, dude, that kid's car is done.
Debris in my eye. Good.
3 weeks after Hurricane Laura, it didn't take long for another storm to be knocking on the front door of the Gulf Coast. This one going by the name of Sally, which would yet again have a very unknown future and prove to be one of my biggest forecasting nightmares that I had ever faced. Originally targeting the city of Biloxi, Mississippi, where sandbagging efforts were already underway to protect local businesses and homes from the storm surge, we couldn't help but shake the feeling that Sally's eastern trends would continue. Day after day, the cone of uncertainty continued to wobble east, getting further and further away from our original target area of New Orleans. So we threw the magic dice and ended up on the Dauphin Island of Alabama, home to only a few hundred people and only one bridge in and off of the island. We seemed to have struck gold and found a perfect structure elevated from the ground to ride out this storm, and with the local hotel being nice enough to even offer up a couple rooms for us to get some much needed rest before our landfall date. However, our forecasting nightmares continued into the next morning when we awoke to Sally already beginning her northern turn, and with the bridge already being shut down in and off the island, and despite our best efforts to negotiate our way out, it became clear that we were stuck. It is now 7:30 in the morning on September 15th. Sally has been downgraded again to 85 mile-an-hour winds.
moving at 2 miles an hour. So, we don't know how strong she's going to be, but we're here. We're the only ones on the island because they blocked it off, and we are ready to go. So we'll see what Sally's got.
Well, we are officially cut off from the world.
Dolphin Island,
Alabama. We are riding it out here. Surge is probably gonna be pretty crazy. We already have tropical storm winds, and we're thinking it might make landfall closer to Gulf Shores. But we can't get there because we are locked down here, in or out. So we'll see how it goes.
As you can probably tell in the tone of my voice, I'm not exactly thrilled with the situation that we've been put in. However, Sally wasn't done showing us surprises. Sally would undergo what would later be the theme of 2020, rapid intensification, ride at landfall, and nearly reach Category 3 intensity just before nightfall. As Sally was on her final approach, the intense waves for such a prolonged period finally started to take a toll on the nearby boat docks we had parked at all afternoon. One by one, we watched helplessly as residents' prized possessions sank to the bottom of the ocean, one of which even broke loose and crashed into a boat on its proper rack that are specifically made to prevent a vessel from breaking loose and being battered along the docks. We eventually lost sight of the docks due to the nightfall and made our way to the far eastern tip of the island. While only a few miles difference, it still put us ever so slightly closer to the most intense winds associated with Sally, and then the surge quickly began to sweep into the island.
Oh yeah.
That was a tree uprooted right there.
Damn it, hold me down there. Come on, flip flop. There we go.
Okay,
Okay.
this is a Category 2.
That was really good.
Oh, dear Lord. Ow.
Yeah, I was getting scanned last night.
You know, it's a strange thing being a storm chaser. 10 years in this business and I had never once visited Lake Charles, Louisiana until 2020. But this year, I couldn't seem to leave. It was now October, and folks are just now getting on their feet again after having Hurricane Laura devastate the surrounding areas, and we're now staring down the barrel of yet another hurricane. To this point, there had been so many storms that they were forced to use the Greek alphabet, something that has not happened since the historic hurricane season of 2005, and none of which made landfall to the US. Now, Delta wouldn't exactly impact the United States to the level of Laura, or provide the most exciting footage. but the story behind the events that occurred during the storm at least warrants a spot in this video. My friend Brandon Clement and I took the approach to this hurricane a little differently. We targeted what chasers call the dirty side of the storm and filmed the storm surge. This is where we would stumble across the community of Sycamore Point, Louisiana, which you wouldn't even know existed other than a small sign for the local state park. While filming the preparations to leave the island, which these folks are no stranger to, I would meet a gentleman by the name of Hugh, who, with no other way of putting it, was a character and a half. You are one of those crazy storm chasers, followed by a humorous laugh and saying, "That's awesome." If we wanted the shots we wanted of this hurricane, we knew this was the place to be. So I asked Hugh if there was any hotels or condos on the island where we could ride out this storm, which there unfortunately was not. But with a grin on his face, he tells me he has someone he wants me to meet, and we drove to the very end of the island to a massive yet gorgeous home, and this is where I get introduced to Lee. He was even nice enough to open his home for us to ride out the storm, which of course we gladly took up the offer. We ate food, played games, and exchanged many stories amongst one another, and while we barely got grazed by the eye of Hurricane Delta, we got exactly what we came for: the surge. And finally, the final intercept of this relentless hurricane season would prove to be one of the most unprecedented events of the 2020 tropical season, and one of the more bizarre chasing stretches I have ever been a part of. While visiting family back home in Ohio and attempting to catch up on some sleep after now 3 hurricanes had ripped through the coast, I found myself driving overnight yet again, but this time for a record-shattering ice storm that would go on to cripple a large area of Oklahoma City. My goal was to document this event and then bolt east to, you guessed it, Louisiana, to await what I thought at the time was going to be a Category 1 hurricane by the name of Zeta. Everywhere I looked across central Oklahoma was pure tree carnage. Over 100,000 people were without power as 3 inches of freezing rain accumulated in just as shy of 48 hours. As the event began to wind down, I began my trek back east towards the coast, where one of the most unique meteorological events that I had ever witnessed was waiting to take shape. As the system that caused this historic ice event over Oklahoma ejected east, it would interact with Zeta in a favorable way to enhance the hurricane's outflow, and what was supposed to be no more than a weak Category 1 hurricane due to extremely cool Gulf waters from the relentless amount of systems that had charged through the Gulf was now on the cusp of becoming a major Category 3 hurricane, moving at warp speed to New Orleans, Louisiana. My original plan was to ride out the storm closer to Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, or even Waveland, but the only shot of a daytime landfall appeared to be in southern Louisiana, and I quickly darted through New Orleans towards the Port Sulphur area to see any viable shelters existed. I found a somewhat sketchy car wash perched up on a small hill that I deemed likely to be above any storm surge if it occurred, and this would be my final resting spot before landfall. This car wash would later come in handy as a huge piece of debris got hurled like a speeding bullet and smashed out the back right window of my chase vehicle.
Hurricane Zeta's final approach.
window, flat tire. Building blew apart, but I'm in the eye. See it starting to come out.
And there you have it, folks. The 2020 hurricane season through the eyes of a storm chaser. What was an overall lackluster year for tornadoes, hurricanes quickly made up for in damages. All in all, the United States saw 6 hurricane landfalls, all of which caused over $1 billion in damage, and if you were to drive from Texas to the Florida Panhandle, you would come across some sort of disaster-related damages from this tropical season. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.